Modern leaders will usually sacrifice anyone but themselves. Stalin, on the other hand, sent his son to front lines. In order to show Soviet folks how patriotic he actually was, he coiled sacrifice even his own son for his country. And he did. Like him or loathe him, his decision was very noble. He refused to exchange a German general with his own son. He said, "I never exchanged general with lieutenant." So, how did this happen? On the 14th of April 1943, the guards of Sachsenhausen concentration camp had a huge problem on their hands. Lying prone on the floor, next to the barbed wire fence and dead, was the son of one of the most powerful men of the Second World War. For a while, the son of Stalin, Yakov Dzhugashvili, remained in German captivity within the concentration camps. Stalin had the chance to save his son's life, but he refused to do so. Prison swaps, even for Hitler's nephew, was rejected by Stalin, as he saw the disgrace of his own son falling into enemy hands as treason. Stalin's son had a terrible ordeal and was volatile himself. But how did he end up in a German concentration camp, and what led to his death? Yakov Dzhugashvili was born to a man who was then navigating his way in politics. There was absolutely no inkling at that time that his father would become the Soviet dictator and one of the most powerful men on the world stage. Stalin did not even have his name then. He was known as Joseph Dzhugashvili, who once robbed a bank in Tbilisi and stole roughly $3.4 million in today's value for the Bolsheviks. This led Stalin to become closer to Lenin and the seats of the communist power. But the police knew of his whereabouts, and the family was forced to flee abroad. Unfortunately, 9 months after Yakov's birth, his mother died of pneumonia at age 22. Stalin then adopted the Stalin surname and delved further into his political beliefs. He left his son in the care of his dead wife's family. Stalin was an absent father to Yakov at best, and he was alleged to have physically and emotionally terrorized his son. He banned him from changing his surname to Stalin and claimed he would never be like him. He was alleged to have had a special hatred for his son, and this was because Yakov had similar mannerisms and looks like his mother. The grief-stricken Stalin could not cope with this. He was said to have jumped into the grave of his beloved wife and tried to carry her body out at the funeral in 1921. Yakov was sent to Moscow to live with his father, and this was especially difficult, as he did not understand the Russian language at that time. Further awful treatment came as Stalin did not allow Yakov to go to the university to study what he was admitted to study, the Institute of Transport. He did different jobs before becoming part of an artillery academy. At a time, Yakov made an attempt to commit suicide because of his father. He was in a very serious relationship with the daughter of an Orthodox priest whom he wanted to marry. But Stalin banned this. Yakov, in response, shot himself in the chest and just missed his heart. Stalin was alleged to have mocked his son, claiming that he couldn't even shoot straight. Yakov enrolled in 1941 to become part of the Red Army Artillery Academy, as his father ordered him to do. He was appointed to the position of commander of an artillery battalion. He took this position shortly before the German invasion of the Soviet Union, which was known as Operation Barbarossa. Yakov was in reserve, and when the fights came to the doorstep of the Soviet Union, he was sent to fight the Germans on the front lines. The might of the German army was too much to begin with for the Red Army, and they rampaged into different lands and territories. In a matter of weeks, Yakov became a prisoner of war. He was fighting as a lieutenant with the brigade of the 14th Howitzer Regiment of the 14th Tank Division. But on the 16th of July, 1941, less than a month after the invasion of the Soviet Union had begun, he was captured by the Germans. This was a huge coup, as they had the son of Stalin, the great enemy of Hitler, in their possession and custody. Regarding the arrest of Yakov, it was said that the Germans surrounded Yakov's battalion. The order was given to retreat, but Yakov did not obey the order. One officer reported that, "I tried to persuade him, but Yakov answered, I am the son of Stalin, and I do not permit the battalion to retreat. It was also claimed that he may have actually been the victim of underhand tactics by fellow soldiers, as it has been alleged that his fellow Red Army soldiers betrayed him because they hated Stalin and his government. Others also claim that he surrendered willingly to the enemy. But for the Germans, this was huge, and 3 days after the capture, they announced that they had Stalin's son to the world. The Soviet dictator was furious. He was outraged and wished his son would have shot himself rather than surrender. Stalin's anger was relentless. Yakov was interrogated severally. In the interrogation, he was rather hostile towards his own father and the Red Army. The Germans had no intention to execute or torture him, as Stalin's son was seen as too valuable an asset. They treated him well and civil. When they questioned him, they wanted to know more about his own life rather than what the plan was for the Soviet Red Army. They may have even wanted him to defect into a high-ranking position against his father. He sort of fed the Germans what they wanted to hear. He claimed the Red Army were not ready and that they had poor training and very ill-disciplined. He criticized the British too. He also shockingly praised Hitler and the Germans, claiming that they were the only remaining empire across Europe and that the continent would be nothing without them. The intention by the Germans was to use Yakov for propaganda purposes against the Red Army. They distributed a propaganda leaflet across the Soviet lines with the text reading, "This is Yakov Dzhugashvili, Stalin's son and artillery officer, who on the 16th of July surrendered near Viet, together with thousands of other soldiers and officers. Follow his example. He is alive and well and feels great. Why do you fight to death when even the son of your leader has surrendered?" But shockingly in response, the Soviet Union and Stalin awarded Yakov with the Order of the Red Banner. Agitated, the Germans sent Yakov to Berlin and locked him up in a guarded villa. He was kept comfortable, as Goebbels wanted to use him to make radio broadcasts. But after these plans failed, Yakov was then moved to the Sachsenhausen concentration camp. There were a number of attempts made which could have saved the life of Stalin's son, but these were not successful. There were different prisoner swaps proposed. This included swapping Yakov for Hitler's nephew, who was locked up in a Moscow prison. So was another proposal to swap Stalin's son for Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus, who was arrested at Stalingrad. Stalin informed the Germans that, "I do not trade field marshals for lieutenants." With this, Yakov's fate was sealed, and he was locked up in captivity. Stalin claimed that Yakov won't get out of captivity. The fascists will shoot him. But no, Yakov would prefer death to betraying the motherland. Sachsenhausen, where he was locked up, was a very rough camp. The conditions here were savage, but Yakov made things worse for himself. He often got into physical fights with British prisoners and had to be separated a number of times from them. He got more and more irate, and this resulted in an incident that led to his death. It was alleged that, on the 14th of April, 1941, Yakov tried to make an escape from the camp. He managed to get past some tripwires and got to the fence on the boundary of Sachsenhausen. It's not known if the guards allowed him to get that far, as they were worried about killing the son of Stalin, because he could have been of use to the Germans. Yakov was confronted by an SS guard, where he screamed at him, "Don't be a coward. Shoot." He grabbed the high-voltage electric fence. The guard fired a single bullet which killed him. Other accounts also claim that Yakov, after having an argument with some British prisoners, ran into the fence which ended his life. An autopsy confirmed that he had died from electrocution before he was shot. The story of Yakov Dzhugashvili's life is one which is dominated by neglect. Yakov had been distanced from his father, one of the most powerful men in the world at the time. Stalin saw Yakov's capture as a stain on his reputation. Stalin allegedly was deeply upset when he learnt of his son's death, but he may have been consumed with the regrets of how he truly treated his eldest son. This was the terrible way that Yakov Dzhugashvili, the eldest son of Soviet leader Stalin, departed this earth. Kindly leave your comments in the comments section below, and thanks for tuning in. I will be back with the next broadcast. Good day.